After about 2, maybe 3 years of obsessive fandom, most Doctor Who fans develop this weird cyst on our brains that causes us to absolutely despise the current showrunner, no matter who it is. Fortunately, scientists are working on a cure for this disease, first detected in the 80s and christened JNT syndrome, and when they do find that cure, I'll be extremely relieved that I can go back to thinking that Chris Chibnall is a rubbish Doctor Who showrunner for actual reasons, rather than because of a medically recognised condition that causes me to think that he is literally the worst person in the history of the world ever, and I hate him, But fortunately, when said person steps down and stops being the showrunner, you can return to normal and re-evaluate their work, so let's do some of that. Russell T Davies' recent foray into grown-up political drama in Years and Years was what made me want to go back and revisit the template for it, the 3-part Season 3 finale of nuwho, where he brings back the Master and makes him conquer Britain and then the world. Watching this now directly after Years and Years was incredibly interesting because it's essentially a kids' bop version of Years and Years with added sci-fi elements. It's probably one of the most ambitious things that Russell did during his time as showrunner. It doesn't quite work, it's full to bursting with flaws and it's full of Russell's overindulgences. The pacing's a bit weird at times and it feels like there's a missing 4th part between Sound of Drums and Last of the Time Lords, but you can't tell me that this finale is not incredibly interesting. There's a cool and ingenious idea that enters the fray about once every 5 minutes or so that makes me want to jump out my seat and punch the air and go, "Fuck yes!" In between all of the bits that make my heart sink and go, "Oh Jesus Russell, what are you doing?" So let's go through each part one by one, because they're all wildly different episodes and just waffling about them as one would feel wrong to me. Part 1, Utopia. I don't think I properly appreciated and recognised at the time just how hideously clever Utopia is at its foundation. Though I mean, I was a dopey 16-year-old back in 2007, so duh, of course I didn't recognise it. Looking back now though, it was a genius move. So in the first 2 season finales, episodes 12 and 13 of the series have been these 2-part stories centred on the returns of classic Doctor Who monsters, the Daleks and the Cybermen. And pretty much everyone was just expecting him to do the Master in episodes 12 and 13 of this one. But Utopia, notably, isn't episode 12. It's episode 11, and it makes itself look like a regular common or garden pulp sci-fi affair before it reveals that our main villain for the imminent finale had been hiding in plain sight this whole time. We were used to episode 11 not really mattering that much and being an inconsequential bit of fluff before the dark finale, and your expectations kinda had to be even lower in this case because Utopia directly followed Blink, and really what could follow Blink except for something that doesn't fucking matter that much? It's just a silly little in-between episode that we gotta get through to get to the finale, right? I mean, yes, Professor Yana is played by Derek fucking Jacobi, one of the best and most famous British actors we have, so yeah, that's a bit of a clue that this one's gonna have more to it than meets the eye, but you know, it's a base under siege affair, the Doctor and co are inside with this scientist working on solution to problem, while the weird monstery humans with facial tattoos, tons of piercings and freaky teeth want to break in and kill everybody. I mean, that just sounds like any Doctor Who story ever, doesn't it? It's pretty standard stuff, but the shock reveal of the Master in the 3rd act and Jacobi giving that skin-crawlingly fantastic performance is one of the finest 10-minute blocks of nuwho in my opinion. This is not to say that Utopia's main concept and preceding 35 minutes aren't at least interesting on their own though. It's a fascinating setup and a really nicely realised world with a broad scope that stretches way beyond the confines of the location that we're actually in. The universe is dying and these humans are seeking refuge in this compound where they're hoping to fly to a newly discovered land that could be their salvation, Utopia. And the episode does all it can to hammer home that while it's a bleak story and a desperate situation that the last of the humans are in here as the universe collapses around them, there is still a sparkle of hope in their eyes. And watching this back after you know what happens to them in the future is proper holy shit levels of heartbreaking.
My mum used to say the skies are made of diamonds.
Good for her. Go on, off you go, get your seat.
Part 2, The Sound of Drums. So, the Master is really good at hypnotising people. What if he manages to hypnotise the British public into electing him Prime Minister? The scope of this thing is rather huge and there's a billion little fragments of ideas in there that would have made for great episodes in their own right. My biggest problem with this finale as a whole is that the core idea feels like an entire season's worth of television that's only been given a few episodes to play with. The Sound of Drums isn't quite the political drama I made it out to be in my introduction, because while there are some bare bones of what Russell would end up doing with Viv Rook in the future, there are limitations of the 3-episode format here that you've got to consider, and you've got to combine that with the fact that they've had to strip back a lot of the elements that probably should come with the story of a cunning and subtle takeover of British political life by an insane Time Lord psychopath. Given this thing's got so much ground to cover in 3 episodes, we don't really have the time to get that far into the mechanics of the Master's takeover. Yet, as well as an extra episode between Sound of Drums and Last of the Time Lords, there should have been another extra episode between Utopia and Sound of Drums fleshing out this process of the Master slowly and subtly weaving his influence into society. There's just some brief nods at the concept of propaganda and a few scenes of acknowledgement of the hypnotism that's gone on to sway people into believing it's their choice to give power to the Master, but said scenes are really good ones though. I loved this one here where the Doctor confronts Martha and Jack about them both thinking that Harold Saxon was great beforehand, but they can't explain why. Everyone just sort of got swept up in voting for him when what's his policies? What did he actually do to make you think he's a good politician?
What was his policy? What did he stand for?
I don't know, he always sounded good. Like you could trust him.
I just would have liked to have spent a lot longer in this world where the Master has obviously pulled some strings to take control, but no one can see this corruption. He's hiding in plain sight in a different way that he was hiding in plain sight as Professor Yana, and there are only occasional people like the Doctor who know what he is, and it feels impossible to fight against the fact that everyone thinks that you're not just wrong, but a potential terrorist. Unfortunately, to fully foster this sense of a hostile and oppressive government regime, you have to make do with just a couple of scenes that do it. But the ones that do are really good scenes. I enjoyed the bit where the journalist confronts Saxon's wife about the fact that he didn't exist prior to about 18 months ago, showing that there are people breaking through the hypnotic conditioning and seeing the Master for who he is, and it's obvious. More people should recognise this charismatic charlatan for what he is, but they don't. And speaking up about this isn't just hard, it's incredibly dangerous. The lady that plays this journalist is really good too. What was her character's name again? I can't remember.
Vivian Rook, Sunday Mirror. You've heard of me.
Wait, Vivian Rook? Wait, that Vivian Rook?
We forget it. Because it worked.
But yeah, the Master gaining this much power and control and putting him this far ahead of the game and casting it as essentially he's already won here is fucking great and resulted in a wildly different finale to the last two. The Master using the reins of power, the systems that we already have in place to neutralise his own personal threats like the Doctor, is fucking chilling. This is not just Daleks want to kill everyone, we've built the system that he's taken charge of, a system that's openly vulnerable to manipulation by corrupt forces. This is the kind of threat that the 10th Doctor needed, because 10 has a tendency to be a bit of an egotist at times. I mean, he spent a fair bit of Utopia bigging himself up and going, do you know, I'm brilliant, but this story takes him down a peg or two. And the Utopia cliffhanger and the cliffhanger to this one see him at his lowest points imaginable, and Tennant gives a great performance in both of them. This isn't just a case of Earth and human race are in danger, although they are. It's a very personal threat here to himself, his companions and Martha's family. And it truly feels totally impossible to combat it, at least not in the same way as the last two finales. The Doctor can do technobabble stuff, we've seen him do it. He can come up with clever ways of beating the Daleks and the Cybermen as they're gaining momentum in previous finales, but if we have it so the Master has already won, he can use his position to put a boot to the Doctor and his companions' throats. He's a truly dominating force in this. Although yes, John Sim is very hammy and over the top and kind of like a pantomime villain in places. You know, he's got a laser screwdriver instead of a lame sonic one. Just try and imagine that he's about 15% less over the top than he is, and that point would be a bit more valid. That being said, I love this ending shot where we close in on the Doctor's face, forcibly aged, broken, and a genocide's happening right before his eyes and he's powerless to stop it. Those slow, terrified breaths just send chills up your spine. It's fucking great. Unfortunately though, when you take the stakes as sick-makingly high as Sound of Drums does, and you gate off so many potential ways back from this point as a means of making the threat feel as real and irreversible as it needs to be, the time is gonna come when you gotta pay the piper. Part 3, Last of the Time Lords. It's weird to think now, over a decade later, that there was a massive toys being thrown out of the pram moment over Last of the Time Lords, when really it's not the worst thing in the world. It's only barely even an underwhelming conclusion to a pretty decent trilogy of episodes if you set it in context. I'm not the only one remembering that there were massive hissy fits thrown over Lost of the Time Lords, am I? I mean, you've probably forgotten all about it by now because there have been much more violently disappointing series finales in the years since. Gee, we were really fucking spoiled in 2007, weren't we? It's also worth noting that about 90% of the problems with Lost of the Time Lords are in the resolution that's way too cheap and easy. It takes until around minute 30 before it goes properly downhill into fanfiction territory. The first 30 minutes are pretty good. This is not to say they don't have their problems, of course, because I remember feeling really deflated back in 2007 when I first saw the episode opens with cutting to a year later. And if I didn't already know that that was what happened, I would have felt the same deflation this time round, particularly since I watched all three of them back to back. As I said earlier, the season 3 finale does feel like it tries to cram an entire season's worth of story into a few episodes, and it feels like a bit of a cop-out to cram the world building of the Earth descending into chaos as the Master causes the genocides of millions and millions of people into quite a lot of tell-don't-show lines of dialogue from Martha and the supporting cast that basically amount to, that was some really heavy shit that happened off-screen in the episode that we didn't see, wasn't it? I mean, yeah, Russell had been using the Time War concept in a similar Lovecraftian way in the previous seasons. What's left in your head and unimaginable is more terrifying than what I could actually physically show you. But I just felt it really broke the good rhythm that we had going here. Sound of Drums have been this pulse-pounding explosion of adrenaline and terror, and Last of the Time Lords all of a sudden brings everything down to being very slow, gloomy, and bleak. Not to say that's a bad thing on its own though, and it's kind of trying to reflect the Doctor, Jack and Martha showing up in a world where Harold Saxon's just been a fact of life for a long time. Here it's dropping the viewer into a world where the Master being in control of everything is just a fact of life. But I just found I wanted a more overt display of that dominating force that the Master uses to subjugate humanity that we'd seen in Sound of Drums, instead of just having him prance about on his airship for a couple of scenes. We don't really see that much of the Master's destruction and dominance. It's like I was missing an entire dimension of this experience that would have made the threatening landscape of Last of the Time Lords feel properly real to me and not just like a series of scenes of characters wandering around quarries jabbering about how important everything is. I just would have really liked those extra episodes between Utopia and Sound of Drums and Sound of Drums and Last of the Time Lords, so we could have actually been shown some stuff happening instead of just being told about it. The disappointing conclusion aside, there are two key moments that Last of the Time Lords is built around. The second super aging of the Doctor, and the reveal of what the Toclafane really are. And yes, I agree that one is noticeably better than the other, but I don't think the Doctor being turned into Dobby the House Elf is as bad as it's been made out to be. And there are much bigger problems in Last of the Time Lords to focus on. The Master's meant to be torturing the Doctor aboard his airship for an entire year and making him watch the world burn, and this is the only real physical torture you could actually show him being put through in what is ostensibly a children's show. I said ostensibly, fanboys, calm down. And yes, it does look really stupid, but as a point of going even further in reducing the Doctor to a complete and total wreck, I can see why this ended up here, and in all fairness, the way it's done, a rudimentary broadcast to anyone who still has a TV working to prove a point that you do not fucking cross the Master, is really effective and spine-chilling. Particularly since it's a fuzzy black and white TV here. They make it look like it's supposed to be some kind of fucking snuff film or something. Okay, yes, it would have been spine-chilling if Dr. Dobby didn't look so fucking stupid, yes, but this idea at its foundation, when looking at it on a story mechanics level, I approve of what Russell was trying to do with Dr. Dobby here. No, it doesn't work at all, but I do appreciate that it's trying. Getting on to the other moment that this episode's built around that is noticeably pretty great, the reveal of what the Toclafane actually are. Jesus Christ, this is dark. Like, so dark and so good. I'm still shocked Russell got away with this. The thought of these people thinking that they're going to Utopia and expecting paradise but suffering unimaginable horrors and having their heads put inside these fucking freaky things is so dark and twisted and strange. And the fact they regress mentally to children and come back with the Master to murder the human race.
Because it's fun!
It's an intense moment of truly cosmic horror. The only problem with this moment is it's over too quickly. This scene's pretty much the end of the Toclafane story, when in my opinion Russell should have milked the realisation and the physical revulsion at that for all it was worth, because oh my fucking god, those people have become these things. Just what the fuck, Russell? Anyway, the ending... Oh god, we're gonna have to talk about the ending, aren't we? Russell only ever seems to do things in extremes. If he goes over the top cartoony, silly and pantomimey, he goes all the way with it, and he does the same thing if he's incredibly gnarly, dark and harsh. And if the Toclafane reveal was going to be as extremely horrifying and heartbreaking as it is, the ending where they use the psychic network and basically prayer to fix everything is... okay, it's not as soppy as the second half of Fear Her, and at least they've set up the psychic network to justify it mechanically, and I don't mind that it's incredibly soppy as such, but you know that thing I said earlier about this story taking the Doctor down a peg or two? That this thing's been a humbling experience for him, a personal threat where the Master wins at almost every turn? Right up until this second where it goes so over the top that the Doctor's basically fucking Space Jesus. I'm fine with it being a soppy resolution, it's just that the entire story has been so brutal and humbling for the Doctor that bringing us back from the brink of disaster by literally talking him up as Space Jesus doesn't really feel earned. I just think the process of wrestling control back from the Master is very sudden. He's got Martha right where he wants her, he's ready to win, then all of a sudden the Doctor is Space Jesus and the world is safe. Oh yeah, and then time gets reversed and almost everything gets put back to normal. Sorry, what? Yeah, time reverses. The Master didn't conquer the world anymore. Paradox is gone. He just killed the President. That was all he did. It just feels far, far too easy. I mean, pretty much anyone would think this. You don't need me to point that out, do you? But the reason for this is because the stakes were too high. Subjugated mankind, fucked up world, millions dead. If they did take down the Master in a way that wasn't a Deus Ex Machina that fixed everything in a matter of seconds, you've still got the rebuilding and loss of life to think about, because the consequences of a story of this scale, this scope, would be catastrophically huge and not something that could be easily dealt with in a 10-minute coda. Yes, it is a cop-out. It's a fucking humongous cop-out, but I'm not angry anymore when looking back at it, because yes, it's a shit ending, but that's the payoff for a story that feels as dangerous as Sound of Drums and most of Last of the Time Lords. Because what else could you feasibly do to fix it, given just how far this story went? Years and Years, while I liked it a lot, did have a touch of this problem too. Spoiler warning, where we just see Viv Rook get arrested in the end and that's it. Russell does seem to know when he's come up with a cop-out ending, because it just goes, and then suddenly it was over, the end. As said though, I got no fucking clue what else he could have done that wasn't a Deus Ex Machina, because otherwise they'd be picking up the pieces from the fallout of these few episodes for fucking years. The Earth would still be reeling from the time that the Master reduced 50% of the planet to fucking holes in the ground by series 24. And it's not like it undoes all of the danger and consequences of the last couple of episodes. The people on the airship still know what happened. Those people at the end of the universe are still going insane and turning into Toclafane. Oh yeah, and another thing that didn't occur to me until I rewatched this is the political fallout. So the British public have just woken up from the hypnosis and realised that they just elected a psychopath who murdered the President of the US live on TV and threatened to subjugate humanity with his alien death spheres. Imagine waking up and realising you voted for that. You enabled the murder of the President of the United States of America. Really, that's an entire spin-off right there. It's a damn shame they never did anything with this. Anyway, the season 3 finale overall is messy. It's really, really messy. It's silly, it's over the top, its ambitions outstrip its limitations by about 52,000 miles, and the ending is so disappointing that it almost here, wrecks any of the goodwill that I had for it throughout the first 2 parts and the first half of the third one. I've never been that struck on Russell-era finales, which seems to be an uncommon position, but in cases like this one, I can't help but stagger back and look at things from a broader perspective and appreciate what it's trying to do instead of what it openly fails to do.